what an earth-shattering moment. Roman Reigns has just sent shockwaves through the entire WWE Universe, returning to aid Solo Sikoa in a brutal assault on Jacob Fatu. This calculated act of vengeance comes after Fatu's shocking betrayal at Money in the Bank, and in the wake of Jey Uso's heartbreaking loss to Gunther, followed by Roman's deeply personal message. The question on everyone's mind is electrifying: is the Bloodline finally reuniting? The WWE landscape has been irrevocably altered tonight. Roman Reigns made a thunderous return, standing shoulder to shoulder with Solo Sikoa to unleash savage retribution on Jacob Fatu. This seismic event caps weeks of relentless chaos, including Jey Uso's devastating championship defeat, Fatu's shocking betrayal of Solo at MITB, and Roman's emotional outreach to Jey. Now, with the tribal chief back in action, every piece seems to be falling into place for a Bloodline reunion that promises to shake WWE to its very foundation. The Samoan dynasty has been in a freefall ever since Jacob Fatu turned on Solo Sikoa at Money in the Bank, costing him the match against Seth Rollins. With Jey Uso reeling from his championship loss and Jimmy Uso conspicuously absent, the Bloodline's future looked bleak. But tonight, Roman Reigns' unexpected return changed everything. It was a stark reminder that the tribal chief still dictates the fate of his family, whether they acknowledge him or not. The arena erupted the moment Roman's music hit during Solo's match against Bronson Reed. As the tribal chief stalked towards the ring, Jacob Fatu's music suddenly blared, but it was a trap. Roman and Solo ambushed Fatu during his entrance, with Roman spearing him through the barricade in a terrifying display of brutality. The cousins then delivered a vicious double Samoan spike to Fatu on the steel steps, as Roman's chilling words echoed, "Nobody betrays this family." Most chillingly, Roman then pointed to the WrestleMania sign hanging overhead, a clear and ominous message that this is merely the beginning. The new Bloodline order. This changes absolutely everything. Bloodline hierarchy restored, Roman immediately reasserted his dominance as tribal chief, with Solo willingly reverting to his role as enforcer. Fatu's future: the Samoan werewolf has just become public enemy number one in WWE. Heyman's panic: backstage footage captured Paul Heyman frantically making a call after the attack, his face etched with panic. Jey's dilemma: with Roman and Solo reunited, will Jey Uso finally answer Roman's call and complete the circle? What's even more intriguing is that Roman didn't just attack Fatu, he ensured Seth Rollins watched from the ramp, briefcase in hand, a clear signal that he is next. The war continues. The Bloodline civil war is officially over. Roman Reigns is back in absolute control. With Fatu decisively dealt with and Solo back in the fold, only one monumental question remains: will Jey Uso finally come home to complete the reunion? Will Jey Uso join Roman and Solo? Is Jacob Fatu finished? And how will Seth Rollins' faction respond to this seismic shift? Sound off in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe, because the Bloodline's war has just begun. Turn on notifications, the tribal chief's reign has officially been reset. This wasn't just a moment. It was a message. And if you're watching this, chances are you felt it too. The chill in the air. The electricity in the arena. The way time seemed to freeze when Roman Reigns walked through that curtain, for the first time in months, and stormed back into a world of chaos that had spun wildly out of control in his absence. But make no mistake, this wasn't a triumphant return. This was a declaration of war. A new chapter in the Bloodline saga has begun, and it may be the most brutal yet. Let's rewind just 72 hours. Money in the Bank, one of WWE's most chaotic nights of the year. Jey Uso, battered and heartbroken, failed to capture gold from Gunther in a match that tested not only his endurance, but his soul. Solo Sikoa, the enforcer, stepped into the ring to face Seth Rollins, until betrayal struck like lightning. Jacob Fatu, Solo's own brother-in-arms. His cousin. A man welcomed into the family with open arms. Fatu turned his back on Solo at the most crucial moment, costing him the match and leaving him humiliated, bloodied, and broken in the center of the ring. And Roman Reigns? Nowhere in sight. Until tonight. In one savage ambush, Roman Reigns sent a message not just to Jacob Fatu, but to the entire WWE Universe: the tribal chief is watching. And he is no longer interested in asking for loyalty. He is ready to take it back by force. It happened during Solo Sikoa's match against Bronson Reed on Raw. The fight was a slugfest, two heavy hitters battering each other like wrecking balls. But no one in the arena was really watching Bronson Reed. All eyes were on Solo. The man looked unhinged. Cold. Dangerous. Betrayal had changed him. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to hurt someone. And then, the lights dimmed. A single beat. And the arena erupted. Roman Reigns' theme hit like a thunderclap. The crowd rose. Some screamed. Some stood frozen. Others simply put their hands on their heads in disbelief. The tribal chief had returned, and he was not smiling. But that wasn't even the real moment of impact. That came seconds later, when Jacob Fatu's music hit. It was supposed to be a confrontation. Fatu stalked out onto the ramp, chest heaving, ready to finish what he started at Money in the Bank. Except he walked straight into a trap. Roman and Solo ambushed him on the entrance ramp like predators on the hunt. A spear that sent Fatu crashing through the barricade. A double Samoan spike that left him coughing blood on the steel steps. And Roman, standing tall under the WrestleMania sign, whispering that haunting line again. Nobody betrays this family. This isn't just another bloodline attack. This is something else. It's calculated. Precise. Chilling. For weeks, WWE fans have watched as the bloodline unraveled, Jey Uso missing in action, Jey losing steam, and Solo struggling to hold things together after Roman's sudden absence. Jacob Fatu's entry felt like a lifeline, a wild card meant to revitalize the dynasty. Instead, he ignited a civil war. Now Roman's return is more than just about revenge. It's about reclaiming power. About restoring order. And if the backstage footage is to be believed, he's not doing it alone. CM Punk was reportedly seen confronting Jacob Fatu shortly after the attack. The footage, though grainy, appears to show Punk exchanging heated words with Fatu, moments before security intervened. No punches were thrown, but the tension? Nuclear. So, what's CM Punk's stake in this? And why now? More importantly, is he aligning himself against Roman, or with him? Roman Reigns didn't just come back to punish a traitor. He came back to put everyone on notice. Especially Seth Rollins. During the post-match chaos, Roman looked directly at Seth standing on the ramp. He didn't need a mic. He just raised his arm and pointed, upward. At the WrestleMania sign. The message was clear. The Bloodline saga may have started as a family feud. But now? It's bleeding into championship territory. And Rollins knows it. You could see it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt. Of fear. Of realization. Roman isn't just here to reunite the Bloodline. He's here to dismantle everything that's risen in his absence. There are moments in WWE history where everything changes in the blink of an eye. The night Hulk Hogan joined the NWO. The night the Shield turned on each other. The night Kofi won at WrestleMania. And now, this night. The night Roman Reigns returned not as a fallen king, but as a calculating tyrant. The night Jacob Fatu, once hailed as the future of the dynasty, was crushed under the weight of its past. The night Solo Sikoa chose sides, not with his heart, but with his blood. The night a new era of the Bloodline began. And the night we all realized, the Civil War may be over, but the real war has just begun. What's next? That's the question that hangs over everything now. Is this the beginning of a Bloodline reunion, or a hostile takeover? Will Jey Uso respond to Roman's emotional message? Will Jimmy resurface? Will Paul Heyman, visibly shaken and seen calling someone moments after the attack, regain control, or be phased out completely? And what role does CM Punk really play in all of this? One thing is certain, Roman Reigns didn't just walk back into WWE. He seized control of it. And if you think Jacob Fatu's betrayal was the climax of this story, you're not ready for what comes next. They called it destiny. They called it inevitable. For weeks, maybe months, fans and insiders alike whispered that Jacob Fatu was the missing piece to reforge the broken dynasty of the Bloodline. Bigger. Meaner. Wilder. Fatu had the look, the pedigree, the intensity, and most importantly, the family name. When he walked into WWE, it felt like a seismic shift. He didn't need to prove himself, he arrived like a storm already in progress. But what no one saw coming, what not even Solo Sikoa saw coming, was the betrayal. Let's set the stage. Money in the Bank. Toronto. A crowd buzzing with energy, riding the high of surprise returns, unpredictable turns, and championship implications. One of the most anticipated matches of the night, Solo Sikoa vs. Seth Rollins. It wasn't just about gold. It was about pride. It was about revenge. It was about power. Solo wasn't walking into that match alone. Not exactly. While Roman Reigns was still off the radar, and the Usos fractured and missing, Jacob Fatu was the new force at Solo's side. In the weeks leading up to Money in the Bank, Fatu had been positioned as Solo's equal, a chaotic presence who, though unstable, seemed fiercely loyal. Until he wasn't. The match was brutal from the start. Seth Rollins, battered from weeks of fights, entered limping but focused. Solo, colder than ever, fought like a man with something to prove. They traded blows, momentum swinging violently between them. Near falls, steel steps, ringside chaos, it was a war. And then it happened. The ref was down. Rollins lay crumpled in the corner. Solo stood tall, teeth bared, ready to end it. That's when Fatu slid into the ring. He had a steel chair. The crowd roared in anticipation. They thought they knew what came next. Fatu would strike Seth, Solo would cover him, and the new era of the Bloodline would rise. The prophecy fulfilled. But instead, Fatu turned. He raised the chair. And he brought it down across Solo Sikoa's back with terrifying force. Once. Twice. 3 times. The arena went dead. A stunned silence followed the echo of metal against bone. No music played. No one moved. Solo rolled onto his stomach, gasping, crawling toward the ropes like he didn't believe what was happening. Fatu stood above him, face emotionless. Cold. Unforgiving. And then he spat on the mat, tossed the chair aside, and walked out without a word. Seth Rollins covered Solo minutes later and retained his title. But no one cared. All eyes were still on the entrance ramp, watching Fatu disappear. What just happened? That was the question everyone was asking. It didn't make sense. It broke every rule. Every code. Family was everything to the Bloodline. Betrayal wasn't just disloyalty, it was sacrilege. And yet Fatu, without explanation, without hesitation, shattered that code in front of the entire world. In the hours that followed, backstage footage leaked. It showed Solo throwing objects across the locker room, screaming at officials, shoving cameras away. No Roman. No Paul Heyman. No Jey. No Jimmy. Just Solo. Alone. Betrayed. Commentators were silent. Social media wasn't. Fans exploded online. Some called Fatu a coward. Others praised him as a revolutionary. Theories flooded Twitter and Reddit. Was this a calculated move? Was someone else pulling the strings? Or was Fatu simply tired of being someone else's weapon? It wouldn't be until days later that Paul Heyman addressed the betrayal on SmackDown, and even then, he offered no clarity. Just a pale face and a brief comment, mistakes were made. Blood has been spilled. And now, debts must be paid. It didn't answer anything. It only made the situation more volatile. Behind the scenes, there was even more tension. Reports began surfacing that Jacob Fatu had been offered a significant push and storyline power, only to reject creative pitches that involved him playing second fiddle. One unnamed source close to creative described him as completely unfiltered and uninterested in being molded. Another WWE producer was overheard saying, "Fatu didn't just break character, he broke the machine." Whether that's true or just locker room mythology, what happened at Money in the Bank cannot be overstated. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. Solo Sikoa, long seen as the next in line, was exposed. Vulnerable. For the first time in his WWE career, he looked stunned, human, and defeated. The cold, stoic enforcer was blindsided not by an enemy, but by kin. That's what cut deepest. It's not hard to understand the emotional fallout. For Solo, this wasn't just a match lost. This was a brother choosing the spotlight over solidarity. A man Solo likely trusted more than any other, turning on him without even a whisper of warning. The look on his face after the chair shots told the whole story. Shock. Confusion. Rage. And somewhere underneath all that, shame. Because betrayal only hurts if you believed in the person who betrayed you. And Solo believed in Jacob Fatu. It didn't take long for the locker room to split. Some veterans reportedly supported Fatu's actions, calling it a power move. Others kept their distance. CM Punk, according to one report, was furious about the scene, seeing it as a dangerous precedent for other incoming stars. Seth Rollins, meanwhile, refused to comment publicly, but during a post-show press conference, he smirked and said, "Sometimes, the bloodline bleeds." The line went viral. Backstage, things only got more complicated. Paul Heyman began calling closed-door meetings. Producers reworked the week's programming overnight. One anonymous WWE insider said the creative team went into emergency narrative repair mode. They didn't need to. The story was already telling itself. This wasn't just a heel turn. It was a mutiny. Fans had always wondered what would happen if the bloodline imploded. For over 3 years, Roman Reigns held the family together through fear, charisma, and brutal leadership. But now, with his absence and Solo's ascension, cracks had widened. Jacob Fatu's betrayal wasn't just about one man. It was about a structure collapsing under its own weight. The bloodline wasn't just a family anymore. It was a powder keg. In the days after the betrayal, WWE's ratings saw a sharp spike. Every fan wanted answers. Every analyst dissected Fatu's body language, his interview history, his prior indie work, looking for clues. But none of it mattered, because Jacob Fatu wasn't giving explanations. Not in tweets. Not in promos. Not even in off-camera interviews. His silence was louder than any promo. And that made it all the more dangerous. What happens when the wild card doesn't play by any rules, not even his own? That's what Solo Sikoa had to ask himself. Because while he might have once been the enforcer, the man who did the dirty work, now he had no one to lean on. No Roman. No Jey. No Jimmy. No Heyman. Just a hole in his back where a steel chair left its mark. And now, with Roman Reigns back in the picture, the betrayal takes on an entirely new meaning. Because Roman doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive. And above all else, he doesn't tolerate betrayal. Not from enemies. Not from family. Certainly not from Jacob Fatu. The bloodline had cracked at Money in the Bank. But what no one could have predicted is what would rise from those ashes just 1 week later, the return of Roman Reigns, and the violent, calculated retribution that would follow. But before we go there, one thing must be made clear. Jacob Fatu didn't just betray Solo Sikoa. He betrayed the legacy of the bloodline. And now, the legacy wants vengeance. For 243 days, the WWE Universe waited. Fans speculated. Pundits guessed. Wrestlers whispered backstage. Ever since Roman Reigns last appeared, the Bloodline narrative had drifted into chaos, into fragments, into something almost unrecognizable from the tribal empire he once ruled with ruthless precision. But what no one saw coming, what no one predicted with certainty, was how Roman would return. Not with a statement. Not with a video package. Not even with a thunderous promo. He came back the way only Roman Reigns can, with pure, surgical violence. The moment his music hit, it wasn't nostalgia that rippled through the crowd, it was adrenaline mixed with fear. Because if there's one constant in WWE over the past half-decade, it's that when Roman Reigns appears, someone is about to suffer. And this time, that someone was Jacob Fatu. Let's rewind to the scene. Monday Night Raw. Solo Sikoa stood in the ring, locked in combat with Bronson Reed. The match itself was intense, two wrecking machines smashing into each other with a kind of primal rage you rarely see. Solo, bruised and still wounded from Fatu's betrayal at Money in the Bank, wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to send a message, that he didn't need Jacob Fatu. That he didn't need anyone. But what the audience didn't know, what Solo didn't know, was that everything in that moment was bait. A trap. Set days ago. Or maybe longer. The lights dimmed. That music hit. And the crowd erupted. Roman Reigns stepped out from the smoke, hoodie pulled tight, beard sharper than ever, expression unreadable. He didn't do the fist pump. He didn't hold the title. He didn't wear the Samoan lei. He didn't need any of it. This wasn't Roman the tribal chief. This was Roman the executioner. He didn't walk to the ring. He stalked. Every step was methodical. Measured. The fans didn't know whether to cheer or tremble. Because deep down, they remembered. Roman doesn't return for reunions. He returns for reckoning. Commentators went dead silent. Then Corey Graves found his voice. Is this real? Is Roman Reigns really here? And what does this mean for Solo Sikoa? The camera panned across Solo's face. And for the first time in months, his stoic glare cracked. His jaw dropped a fraction. His eyes widened just enough to show surprise. Because Roman Reigns was not supposed to be here. Not yet. But just as the shock set in, another beat dropped. Jacob Fatu's music. Chaos screamed back into the arena. Fatu stepped onto the ramp like a war god, shirtless, wild-eyed, defiant. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't cautious. He came for a fight. But he never made it to the ring. Roman Reigns didn't wait. He launched forward. No theatrics. No warning. Just a full-speed sprint and a spear that folded Fatu in half and drove him through the barricade like it was made of paper. The impact echoed. The crowd exploded into a frenzy of camera flashes, screams, and disbelief. And still, Roman wasn't finished. Solo, already outside the ring, stood beside his cousin. And without needing a word, the two moved as one. Like wolves in sync. They dragged Fatu's limp body up the steel steps. And then came the double Samoan spike. It wasn't just an exclamation mark. It was a signature. A bloody one. The arena went silent for a heartbeat. Not from boredom or confusion. From shock. Because the message was clear. This wasn't just retribution. This was a public execution. Then Roman leaned down. His mouth inches from Fatu's ear. Nobody betrays this family. It was barely a whisper, but the camera caught it. And the internet set on fire. This wasn't the same Roman Reigns who'd once clung to power through psychology and politics. This wasn't the smiling tribal chief flanked by Heyman and dripping gold. This was a colder version. A more dangerous version. Because now, Roman wasn't defending a legacy. He was out to burn anything that tried to rewrite it. The aftermath was chaos. Officials swarmed. EMTs surrounded Fatu, who didn't move for several minutes. Heyman, watching from backstage, was caught on camera pacing and muttering. It's too early, he wasn't supposed to come back yet. Too early for who? Was Heyman afraid? Was he left out of the plan? It didn't matter. Roman Reigns wasn't asking for permission anymore. And perhaps the most chilling part of it all, Roman didn't even stay to cut a promo. He didn't take a mic. He didn't gloat. He walked up the ramp with Solo by his side and paused only once. Under the WrestleMania sign. The same one that loomed in the backdrop like a silent witness. Roman looked up at it. Then looked straight into the camera. Then walked away. No words. No promises. Just a warning shot. Within hours, the internet was ablaze. Clips of the ambush hit every platform. YouTube. TikTok. Twitter. Wrestling subreddits flooded with conspiracy theories. Some swore this signaled a full-scale Bloodline reunion. Others insisted Roman had simply come back to destroy what he'd once built. There was no official word from WWE. Just a single tweet from Roman's account. Order will be restored. 4 words. No hashtags. No mentions. Just a calm, cold declaration of intent. And here's what made the moment even more profound. In the weeks leading up to Money in the Bank, the Bloodline had fractured so completely, many wondered if the story had peaked. Jey had lost. Jimmy had vanished. Solo had been left rudderless. And Jacob Fatu, the wild card meant to inject new life into the faction, had set fire to the whole thing. But in one moment, Roman reset the entire board. He returned not just as a character, not just as a wrestler, but as a force of nature. His presence alone changed every dynamic. Solo, once spiraling, suddenly aligned. Fatu, once ascendant, now broken. The power had shifted back to the source. And the most dangerous part? Roman Reigns looked completely, absolutely, terrifyingly calm. This wasn't a man scrambling to reclaim control. This was a man who had waited, watched, and struck only when the time was right. If you ask the veterans backstage, they'll tell you the same thing. Roman doesn't just return. He calculates. He plots. And when he moves, it's because he's 10 steps ahead of everyone else. So what does it mean that he chose now to come back? What does it mean that he attacked Fatu with such surgical precision? And what does it mean that he stared directly at the WrestleMania sign after doing it? There's only one logical answer. This isn't over. It's just beginning. And if you're Seth Rollins, if you're CM Punk, if you're anyone holding gold or glory in WWE, you should be sleeping with one eye open. Because Roman Reigns is no longer just the tribal chief. He's the reckoning. And his return didn't shake the arena. It shook the foundation of the entire company. Jacob Fatu was supposed to be the missing link. The injection of chaos. The raw fire. The next evolutionary step in the Bloodline's legacy. When WWE finally signed the former MLW World Heavyweight Champion, one of the most dangerous, unpredictable performers in the wrestling world, it wasn't just a business acquisition. It was a shot of adrenaline into the company's most iconic faction. For months, fans had speculated. Fatu's name was whispered every time the Bloodline seemed to falter. Every time Solo Sikoa looked alone. Every time Roman Reigns vanished into the shadows. Jacob Fatu would fix it all. He was the enforcer to Solo's enforcer. He was the hammer Roman never had to swing himself. He was everything the Usos were not, wild, feral, driven not by loyalty but by instinct. And for a few brief moments, it seemed like destiny had finally aligned. Then, in the blink of an eye, Jacob Fatu wasn't the future of the Bloodline. He was its greatest betrayal. To understand how we got here, you have to understand who Jacob Fatu really is. Because this wasn't a storyline pivot. This wasn't a forced heel turn. This was a man following a code that WWE has never fully understood. Jacob Fatu is not a polished product. He never has been. Raised in the storied Anoa'i dynasty, he comes from the same bloodline as Roman Reigns, the Usos, Yokozuna, Rikishi, and The Rock. But his path was darker. Harsher. Less camera-ready. He spent years fighting on the independent circuit, demolishing anyone who stood in his way. MLW, Game Changer Wrestling, House of Glory, Fatu didn't just win matches. He destroyed reputations. He wasn't a showman. He was a storm in human form. What made him terrifying was his unpredictability. He could moonsault like a cruiserweight, brawl like a street fighter, and move like a panther. No wasted motion. No wasted words. So when he arrived in WWE, the company knew they couldn't tame him. They'd have to let him burn. And they did, at first. His debut was violent. Quick. Unforgettable. Fans immediately took notice. This wasn't just another Anoa'i cousin thrown into the mix. This was a war machine unleashed. And when he aligned with Solo Sikoa, it felt like a new axis of terror had been born. The bloodline, fractured and vulnerable, suddenly had teeth again. Solo was no longer a lone soldier. Now he had a nuclear deterrent. Jacob Fatu didn't need to speak to get over. Every punch he threw spoke volumes. Every glance carried history. Fans bought in fast. Fatu-ism trended within hours of his debut. And inside the locker room, people started asking questions. Was this the new bloodline? Would Roman even return? Or had the torch been passed? The energy shifted. Suddenly, Jacob Fatu wasn't just part of the bloodline, he was the gravitational center. But here's the thing about power in WWE, it's never gifted. It's always borrowed. And the debt comes due fast. Behind the scenes, sources say Fatu wasn't interested in being slotted into a hierarchy. He didn't want to be Solo's bodyguard. He didn't want to cut scripted promos about tribal unity. He wanted freedom. He wanted fire. He wanted a spotlight without the leash. And when Solo Sikoa began stepping into Roman Reigns' shoes, something changed in Fatu's demeanor. He stopped walking behind Solo. He started walking beside him. And then, a week before Money in the Bank, he walked into the locker room, looked Solo in the eye, and said, "I don't follow anyone." Solo laughed. Fatu didn't. That moment never made air. It never even made it to social media. But people in the room say it was the beginning of the end. Money in the Bank should have been a coronation. Solo Sikoa challenging Seth Rollins. Fatu in his corner. A new chapter about to be written. Instead, the match became a wake. Fatu's steel chair shot wasn't just betrayal, it was a manifesto. No speech. No explanation. No catchphrase. Just a chair crashing against flesh, the roar of the crowd turning into gasps, and a man walking out of the arena as if nothing had happened. The aftermath was instant and violent. WWE social media scrubbed references to Fatu from upcoming promotions. Backstage sources said Paul Heyman was furious, rattled, blindsided. Solo reportedly confronted officials, demanding to know if Fatu's actions were sanctioned. They weren't. The betrayal was scripted, but the delivery was real. Because Jacob Fatu wanted everyone watching to believe one thing, this wasn't about storylines. This was about principle. He didn't turn on Solo for the spotlight. He turned on Solo because he refuses to kneel. There's a code buried deep in the Samoan wrestling tradition: loyalty is earned through action, not blood. And to Fatu, Solo hadn't earned it. Not yet. In the aftermath of the betrayal, Fatu was nowhere to be found for days. No interviews. No tweets. No backstage sightings. Then, just hours before Roman Reigns' return, a fan snapped a blurry photo of Fatu alone in a gym in Las Vegas. Shirt soaked, hands taped, knuckles bleeding. The caption was simple, focused. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing about Jacob Fatu. He doesn't care what the fans think. He doesn't care about being cheered or booed. He doesn't care about legacy or championship belts. He cares about violence. About respect. About dominance. But in turning his back on Solo Sikoa, he broke the one rule that has defined the Bloodline since day one. You don't betray family. Even if you don't follow them. And now, he's paying the price. Roman Reigns returned not just to punish a traitor. He returned to erase one. The spear. The double Samoan spike. The cold stare. All of it was surgical. But what happened backstage after the attack was even more telling. Multiple sources confirmed that CM Punk confronted Fatu just minutes after the segment. The details are fuzzy. Security stepped in quickly. But what's clear is that Punk didn't come to shake hands. He came to draw a line. Because Jacob Fatu, in one swift act, has gone from the Bloodline's greatest hope to WWE's most volatile wildcard. Some believe he'll align with Seth Rollins, joining forces against Roman's empire. Others believe he's too unstable to trust. And then there are those who believe Fatu doesn't want allies. He wants war. If that's true, the future is terrifying. Because when a man who doesn't fear exile, who doesn't crave glory, and who doesn't bow to anyone, when that man has nothing left to lose, he becomes unstoppable. The WWE locker room knows it. The fans can feel it. And Roman Reigns, whether he'll admit it or not, understands it better than anyone. That's why he struck first. Because if Jacob Fatu isn't dealt with now, completely and publicly, he becomes more than a problem. He becomes a revolution. But here's the question no one wants to ask out loud: what if Roman failed? What if Fatu isn't broken? What if he's only just begun? For most of his WWE tenure, Solo Sikoa has been the man who speaks with his fists. Stoic. Brutal. Silent. He walked into the Bloodline not as a talker, not as a strategist, but as the final piece of Roman Reigns' iron-fisted regime. When Solo debuted in Clash at the Castle to save Roman from Drew McIntyre, it was a moment that shifted the balance of WWE's main event scene overnight. In one act, he went from NXT standout to major player on the biggest stage of all. But was he ever meant to lead? Or was he always designed to follow? That's the central question now swirling around the Bloodline Civil War fallout. After Jacob Fatu's betrayal and Roman Reigns' sudden return, Solo Sikoa stands at the center of a volatile, blood-soaked chessboard. And the world is starting to ask, is Solo the next tribal chief? Or is he just the last loyal pawn? To understand Solo's position now, you have to rewind the tape. Back to when he was brought into the Bloodline under orders from the elders of the Anoa'i family. His role was never ambiguous: protect Roman. Enforce the will of the tribal chief. Make examples out of anyone who questioned the hierarchy. And Solo did exactly that. Week after week, he wrecked anyone in Roman's path. He didn't talk. He didn't posture. He just delivered pain. When Roman barked orders, Solo executed them. No questions. No hesitation. He was a one-man wrecking crew, draped in silence and menace. But that silence had a cost. Because over time, as the cracks in the Bloodline began to show, Jimmy's rebellion, Jey's hesitation, Roman's insecurity, Solo remained stuck in the role of the loyal soldier. Never promoted. Never praised. Just used. That dynamic only grew more visible after Roman stepped away from television. Solo suddenly found himself without command. And for the first time, he started showing signs of independence. His matches became more brutal. His entrances more self-assured. He didn't wait for approval. He didn't check for permission. He started moving like a man who didn't just want to enforce power, but hold it. Enter Jacob Fatu. Fatu's arrival was initially seen as reinforcement. But in retrospect, it was a stress test. Could Solo lead? Could he command respect from someone who doesn't bow to authority? The answer came in steel chair shots. Fatu didn't believe Solo was fit to lead. And maybe, deep down, Solo didn't either. Because in the moments after that betrayal, on the mat, clutching his ribs, looking up at a cousin he thought was an ally, Solo didn't look like a leader. He looked like a man left behind. But that's not where the story ends. Because what followed in the days after Money in the Bank revealed a different side of Solo. One fans hadn't seen before. Rage. Raw, unfiltered, uncontainable rage. Backstage reports described Solo flipping over tables, shoving producers, and refusing medical help. Not out of arrogance, but out of fury. And for the first time, Solo Sikoa picked up a microphone. It was off camera. A dark segment, never broadcast. But the words leaked. He thinks I'm weak? He thinks I need saving? I don't need anybody. I am the Bloodline. The crowd in the arena that night didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They stood in stunned silence. Because Solo had finally spoken. Not in grunts. Not in violence. In words. And those words were the first true sign that maybe he wasn't a pawn anymore. But here's the catch. Just days later, Roman Reigns returned. And Solo didn't object. He didn't resist. He stood beside him. Moved with him. Spiked Jacob Fatu with him. Without hesitation. So now the question becomes murkier. Was that loyalty? Or self-preservation? Did Solo fall back into the fold because it was comfortable? Or because Roman offered him something he couldn't build on his own? Structure. Power. Legacy. There's another wrinkle to consider. During Roman's return, there was a very specific visual moment. After Fatu was left motionless on the steel steps, Roman extended his hand, not for a handshake, but palm up, open, waiting. Solo looked at it for 2 seconds too long. And then he took it. That hesitation speaks volumes. It wasn't obedience. It was calculation. Because now, Solo Sikoa is not the same man who debuted under Roman's shadow. He's tasted leadership. He's felt betrayal. He's been humbled and reactivated. And while he may be walking beside Roman now, the dynamic has shifted. He's not just the enforcer anymore. He's the executioner with options. Sources backstage have reportedly said that Solo has been more vocal in creative meetings, pushing for darker, more violent character beats. He's asking questions about the future of the Bloodline storyline. He's not content to just be muscle. He wants moments. One WWE writer described it like this: he's not speaking for Roman. But he's also not waiting for Roman to speak anymore. And that's dangerous. Because Solo Sikoa is the type of character who doesn't need a belt to be dominant. He doesn't need catchphrases. He doesn't even need crowd support. He just needs a target. And now, with Jacob Fatu in ruins, Jey Uso in limbo, and Roman Reigns reasserting dominance, Solo is the one piece on the board that can move in any direction. He can realign with Roman fully, and help rebuild the Bloodline in its original image. He can rebel, take what he's learned and carve his own path, even if it means tearing down the man who gave him his shot. Or he can wait, bide his time, play the loyal soldier while gathering strength. Any of those outcomes are terrifying. Because Solo doesn't posture. He strikes. And that makes him more dangerous than ever. In WWE's complex ecosystem of characters, showmen, icons, rebels, Solo is something else. He's a force of inevitability. And the question the entire locker room is now asking is this: when that inevitability explodes, who's going to survive? Because whether he knows it or not, Solo Sikoa has already stopped being a pawn. Now the only question left is what kind of king he wants to be. CM Punk wasn't scheduled to be there. There was no advertised appearance. No promo. No backstage tease. But somewhere in the moments following Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa's brutal assault on Jacob Fatu, When the cameras were supposed to be off and the chaos dying down, Punk appeared in the hallway like a ghost no one expected, and no one could ignore. Security cameras captured the footage. Fatu, half dragging himself through the back corridors, blood still on his lips, staggering toward the medical staff. A crew member holding a towel to the back of his head. And then Punk. Black hoodie. No entrance music. No production team. He wasn't there for a moment. He was there with purpose. And what happened next turned the entire storyline on its head. CM Punk walked up to Jacob Fatu, jaw clenched. They were nose to nose. The hallway fell silent. Medical staff froze. Fatu, barely standing, looked up at him with rage behind his eyes. Punk didn't flinch. He said something. It's unclear exactly what, it was too quiet for the camera mics to pick up. But Fatu responded, his shoulders tightening. Whatever Punk said, it struck a nerve. Seconds later, officials stepped in. A shouting match erupted. Fatu had to be held back. Punk turned and walked away calmly, like the confrontation had already played out the way he planned. And just like that, CM Punk entered a story he was never meant to be part of. Or was he? Because the more you pull at the threads, the more you realize, maybe Punk's been orbiting this chaos longer than anyone thought. To understand what CM Punk is doing here, you have to look back, not just at his recent return to WWE, but at the reasons he came back in the first place. Punk doesn't operate on surface-level motivations. He's not a show up, cash the check, hit the GTS kind of performer. He works in layers. Subtext. Control. Chaos. And if there's one thing CM Punk craves more than anything, it's influence. That's why the Bloodline saga is the perfect storm. For over 2 years, Roman Reigns and his empire have controlled WWE's narrative. The faction absorbed airtime, headlines, merchandise sales, and fan momentum. They were the center of gravity. And Punk? Punk hates monopolies. His entire brand is built on rebellion. On pushing back against the establishment. On carving his own lane. So, when Punk returned, and found that Roman was still the shadow looming over everything, he didn't just want to compete with that legacy, he wanted to disrupt it. But he had to wait for the cracks. And Jacob Fatu was the biggest one. From the beginning, Fatu was unpredictable. Violent. Independent. And Punk? He's made a career out of recognizing potential in chaos. There are whispers backstage, still unconfirmed, that Punk reached out to Fatu weeks before Money in the Bank. Not to offer mentorship. Not even to recruit him. Just a conversation. A warning. They'll use you. And when they're done, you'll be forgotten. It's the same thing Punk has said in interviews for years about WWE's system. And when Fatu betrayed Solo Sikoa with that steel chair, Punk didn't celebrate publicly. But he wasn't surprised either. Because that wasn't just a betrayal of a cousin. It was the collapse of trust. The end of obedience. The start of something new. Punk has seen this play out before. In stables. In locker rooms. In companies. And now, with Fatu cast out, beaten, isolated, Punk might be the only voice speaking to him that doesn't come from within the Anoa'i family. That alone gives him power. But here's where it gets more complicated. CM Punk doesn't want to rebuild the bloodline in his image. He wants to burn the entire thing down. Everything Roman represents, lineage, legacy, hierarchy, it's everything Punk has always stood against. This isn't about gold for him. It's about control. And aligning with Fatu, even indirectly, creates leverage. Leverage against Solo. Leverage against Roman. Leverage against Seth Rollins. Because make no mistake, Punk isn't playing sides. He's playing chess. He doesn't see Fatu as a pawn. He sees him as a grenade. And if he can guide that explosion even a little, the aftershock could shift WWE's balance of power forever. But there's another layer. Punk's return to WWE wasn't seamless. He's still navigating politics, backstage tension, and strained relationships with key figures. Aligning himself with the Bloodline story, whether explicitly or by inference, puts him right back at the top of the conversation. It makes him unavoidable. And CM Punk always thrives when he's the center of the storm. So what did he say to Fatu in that hallway? Some believe he offered an alliance. Others think it was a warning, stay away from my path, or you'll end up just like the rest. A third theory, and perhaps the most dangerous, is that Punk told him the truth. Not a threat. Not a pitch. But something else. A mirror. You're free now. Don't go crawling back. Because that's the risk. Roman Reigns is back. And Roman knows how to manipulate blood. How to play on guilt. How to restore order through fear. If Fatu realigns, if he begs for forgiveness, the cycle continues. But if Punk gets to him first? Then the bloodline will never reunite. It will burn. There's another wrinkle. Seth Rollins. Punk and Seth have been circling each other since Punk's return, sometimes allies, more often enemies. Their disdain is public, personal, and venomous. But in the world of WWE, enemies often find themselves fighting common wars. And with Roman now pointing to the WrestleMania sign, clearly marking Seth as a future target, it's no longer a matter of if, but when. Could Punk and Seth find common ground in resisting Roman's resurgence? Could Fatu become the X-factor neither man expected? The Bloodline story has always been about power. Who has it? Who wants it? And who's willing to bleed for it? CM Punk isn't family. But he knows how families break. He's seen it. Caused it. Survived it. And that makes him the most dangerous outsider in this war. Because he doesn't want to win the tribal crown. He wants to make sure no one wears it again. Jacob Fatu may be broken. But Punk doesn't see broken. He sees potential. He sees a weapon. And Roman Reigns should know this better than anyone. When CM Punk decides to get involved, the story always changes. Paul Heyman has always prided himself on being the smartest man in the room. He doesn't throw punches. He doesn't lace up boots. He doesn't need to. For decades, Heyman's power hasn't come from physical dominance, it's come from knowing things before anyone else does. So, when the footage hit WWE's digital channels of Heyman pacing backstage with a phone glued to his ear, voice trembling, eyes darting between shadows, it wasn't just rare. It was historic. Paul Heyman was rattled. That tells you everything you need to know. Let's break down what happened. Moments after Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa ambushed Jacob Fatu at Raw, after the double Samoan spike, after the spear through the barricade, after Roman's icy declaration, cameras cut to backstage. Heyman stood alone in a hallway, away from crew members and production. Phone to his ear. Sweating. Breathing heavy. His voice was caught on a hot mic. You didn't tell me he was coming tonight. He wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't the plan. He wasn't yelling. But he was shaken. Visibly. And if you know Paul Heyman, you know what that means. He's losing control. For years, Heyman has operated like a consigliere in a mob family. The wise voice behind Roman's throne. The man who arranged the deals, cleaned the blood, kept the lines of power intact. Roman might have been the tribal chief, but Heyman was the oracle. That aura cracked when Roman disappeared from WWE programming. Heyman suddenly found himself trying to steer a ship with no captain. Solo Sikoa respected him, but didn't listen. Jimmy Uso vanished. Jey went solo. And Jacob Fatu? He didn't even pretend to answer to Paul. For the first time since the Bloodline formed, Heyman looked expendable. He tried to adapt. He played mediator. Tried to unite the fractured pieces. Offered cryptic commentary on SmackDown, teasing that the island of relevancy is under siege. But no one was listening. And now, with Roman's return, a return that happened without Heyman's apparent knowledge, his grip on the narrative has completely unraveled. Because let's be clear, Roman Reigns doesn't move without strategy. If he returned without informing Heyman, it wasn't an oversight. It was a statement. You're no longer in the inner circle. That single shot of Heyman, pacing, calling someone unknown, it did more to redefine his character than any promo could. This is not the smug, all-knowing wise man we've grown used to. This is a man terrified of what comes next. Who was he calling? Some believe it was the Anoa'i elders. Others think it was Jimmy Uso, who's been conspicuously absent during the recent events. A darker theory suggests he was calling Triple H or internal WWE management, trying to recalibrate story direction before it spiraled out of control. But the most compelling theory? He was calling Roman himself. And Roman didn't answer. Because Roman has already decided Heyman's role is over. That's the narrative shift happening quietly behind the chaos. While fans focus on the explosive visuals, Fatu's fall, Solo's shift, Punk's meddling, Heyman's story is becoming a silent tragedy. He built the Bloodline's power structure. And now, he's watching it collapse, without him. There's symbolism here that can't be ignored. In ancient Rome, when the emperor no longer trusted his advisor, that advisor didn't get demoted. He got executed. Heyman may not be in physical danger, but character-wise, he's on the edge of irrelevance. And for a man who survived ECW, the Alliance, Brock Lesnar's rise and fall, and the early days of Roman's empire, irrelevance is worse than death. It's exile. WWE cameras later showed Heyman approaching Roman and Solo after the assault. He didn't walk with them. He didn't lead. He trailed behind. Silent. Looking not like the wise man, but like a man waiting to be summoned, like a servant unsure if he still had a master. The old Roman Reigns would have nodded. Said something. Reassured him. This Roman didn't even look back. That was intentional. It told the audience what words didn't need to. Heyman is no longer the voice of the Bloodline. He's just another relic in a dynasty that's rewriting itself in real time. But don't count Heyman out yet. Because if there's one trait he's always relied on, besides his intelligence, it's his survival instinct. He doesn't fight for control. He adapts to it. If Roman no longer sees him as essential, Heyman may find a new purpose. A new ally. A new voice. That could be Seth Rollins. It could be Jey Uso. It could even be CM Punk. Because in WWE, nothing is more dangerous than a desperate genius with nothing left to lose. And Heyman, for all his manipulation, still knows more about the Bloodline's internal workings than anyone else. The question isn't whether he'll make a move. It's whether he'll make it in time. Because this new Bloodline, this stripped-down, violent, tribal version, has no room for whisperers. It only has room for warriors. And Paul Heyman? He's never been a warrior. But he's been the man who survives them. That may be enough. Or it may finally be the end of the line.